Here's a little secret for those of you who are just starting on that journey toward investing towards your future. I think our industry has done a lousy job of educating you. In fact, the poor education could be costing you thousands of dollars later on in life when you're depending on that money. In this video, I want to share with you some of that secret sauce that others aren't aware of that may cost them thousands, but I want to make sure you don't make the same costly mistakes. Before we get there though, subscribe to our channel so you're alerted to when we post new videos and I can get you more of this information on a timely basis. We live in interesting times. I've had a lot of conversations over the past few months with my kids or stepkids, with my clients' kids, friends' kids, and the conversation seems to be, particularly when it comes to investing, around making that short-term, quick hit, immediate windfall, right? You know, people are investing in cryptocurrency or GameStop or looking for that quick hit that can get them that first, get this, $1 million. Here's what we're all looking for, right? Here's my first $1 million. Authentic currency. It's $1 million. This is what we're all looking for, right? But I want to share with you how to think about a proper structure on long-term investing in the event that you don't hit that windfall right away, which is the vast majority of us. I am old school. I do believe in the markets. I do believe that history can repeat itself, certainly with no guarantees. But I believe that we can learn lessons from the past, and I strongly believe that there really are no shortcuts to success. Now let me focus on what I believe is wrong messaging. We're sending you down the wrong path, and it may cost you thousands of dollars looking forward. A number of years ago, an insurance company called ING did a marketing campaign where an individual was walking down the street and held under his arm this big yellow bar. It was a number. It was like $1,432,638. And sometimes he would be walking down the street and everything would be okay. And sometimes he would get hit by a bus, or sometimes it would go in flames. And I think the messaging was really off base. Because if I said to you, as you're starting off investing, that you need, because the message was you needed that $1.6 million in order to retire, okay? That was the overarching message. If I said to you, while you're in your 20s or in your 30s, that you need $1.6 million to retire, you'd probably kind of look with that empty gaze and go, I don't have that. I can't get there. So I'm not going to do this. It just takes too long. I don't even understand. I can't get my head around this. So I'm just not going to do it at all. Too frustrating. Bad messaging. Another piece of bad messaging I get every single day on my iPad, streaming, that this stock outperformed the market today, or this stock underperformed the market today. Are we really interested in what the market does on a day-to-day basis? All we're doing is reinforcing the fact that you've got to outperform the market on a day-to-day basis, and your focus needs to be very, very short term. And I'm going to share with you why that puts you in the wrong direction and how to recalibrate your thinking to just completely ignore that type of messaging. Now, my first real teaching moment for you is this, and this is really important. It's the power of compounding and starting early. So let me take you to my screen for just a moment. So this is the story of someone who started investing at the age of 20, invested for 8 years only. That's the left-hand side example 1. versus example 2, where this individual started at age 28 and then invested for the next 39 years. The assumption here was that there was an investment annually of $2,000. And for this illustration, we assumed a 9% overall rate of return, certainly no guarantees for any future performance. But take a look at this for a moment. On example 1, the person who started at age 20 and then never invested again after the age of 28, and I would submit to you that that actually is inaccurate if the person had enough vision to start investing at the age of 20. This person probably continued to invest past the age of 28. So this is probably a little bit lower than what this individual would probably do, but I think for illustrative purposes, it makes a lot of sense. So you can see that for 8 years at $2,000 a year, this individual invested $16,000. And on the right-hand side, this individual invested for 39 years, $2,000 a pop, and invested $78,000. And at the age of 67, the person who only invested for 8 years outperformed the person who invested for 39 years by about $80,000. This is a very important message. We need to share this with our kids, with our grandkids. We need to know that if we are in our 20s and 30s and we don't have kids or grandkids, that we need to be taking this message to heart. The earlier we can start, the better we will be in the long run. I hear too many stories of people who get into their 50s and say, oh my gosh, I now have to accelerate my investments so I could then, have a possibility of retiring at some point down the road. If you started earlier, and I hear this comment from so many people, if I only knew now what would have happened if I started earlier. I should have started earlier. Don't let this pass you by. If they're saying start earlier and you're on the earlier stage, take it to heart. It's the small, one step at a time investing, not this windfall, but if you take to heart long term, the compounding effect of money, and just do it little by little, not worry about the big $1.6 million that you're going to need, but just take one step at a time, you'll be well on your way towards pursuing your long-range goals. And speaking of goals, this is really important. And it's a question I ask so many of the people who I get in front of, who are in their 20s and 30s. What should I do with this money? How should I invest? And the first question I ask is, what's your time frame? If you're looking to put this money away and have it earmarked towards buying a house in the next 3 years, or going on a trip in a couple of years, or doing a home improvement in a couple of years, then putting this money to work in the market probably is not a good idea, because there's way too much risk in the short term, and you may actually lose some principal versus gaining more by investing. So my counsel is, for short-term goals, investing may not be the best thing for you. It's okay to have that money sort of on the sidelines, earmarked for a particular goal. But if you say to me, I have at least 5 years or longer, and the 5 years is sort of like the midterm goal, but if you're thinking 15, 25, 30 years out, long-term range, that's where we're really going to focus on how to properly think about together the investments for you. So the second teaching moment here is for you to understand the nature of markets. We're talking about equity markets, right? Stocks, etc., mutual funds, exchange traded funds, whatever they are, equity markets. In short time frames, the markets can be very volatile. They are very uncertain. But in longer term times, they become a bit more predictable. Certainly, no guarantees, but let me take you to my chart for just a moment. Now, this will give you a good sense of the average stock market returns here in the US going through the end of 2020. And for many of us who've been in this business for a long time, as I have been, we tend to think of, markets over long periods of time return somewhere in the vicinity of 10%. And this chart sort of backs it up a bit. In the last 10 years, ending 2020, stock market was up approximately 13.9% annually during that time. We've had a roaring bull market, and that's where the returns have been a little bit higher than historical averages. As you take a look at 30 years, it's a little over a 10% return. And 50 years, it's a little over a 10% return. So it's important now to think about in terms of long-term, if you were fully invested in the markets, and that assumed, that you were 100% in the market, which few people ever are. But the market itself, if you think about it in terms of 10% returns, again, no guarantees, then you have some sort of benchmark in mind. Now remember, the market actually rarely on a year-to-year basis returns that 10%. It's just that over time, it returns approximately 10%, which sometimes it's up and sometimes it's down. Now, the important thing here is another teaching moment, the rule of 72. So if you take 10%, theoretically, given the math, approximately every 7 years, your money doubles. 7 times 10 is 70. They say the rule of 72. Every 72, it doubles. We'll just use a round number, 7 and 10, okay? So at the end of 7 years, your money could double. So let's say 50,000 could become 100,000 after 7 years. And then after 14 years, that 100,000 would be 200,000. And after 21 years, it would be theoretically 400,000. So you went from 50,000 to about 21 years later, it's 400,000. If we think small and start there and embrace the fact that markets will probably continue to do what they're doing over long periods of time, and if we have time on our side, then we can think about the long-term planning and the long-term strategic investing, starting small and thinking about it growing bigger. Now, this is the next teaching moment, folks, and the question I get is, when's the right time to get in the market? How about timing the market? Oop, the market's up. Maybe we should sell. The market's down. Maybe we should buy. Let me share with you some statistics with regards to trying to time the market versus being a long-term buy and hold investor. Let me take you to my screen. So this was a study done by Fidelity, which indicated if you invested $10,000 in the S&P 500 index in January 1st, 1980, through December 31st, 2018, you'd have had $659,515. But if you missed just a few key days, your portfolio would be at least 35% smaller. So let's take a look at the next slide. If you missed the best 5 days, that 659,000 only became 426,000. Or if you missed the 10 best days, that 659,000 dropped to 318,000. Or the 30 best days. You get what I'm getting at, right? The message here is it can be very costly to try to get in and out of markets. For long-term strategies, for a core part of your portfolio, you really want to stay invested in the balance. You could call it core and hub. In your basic core portfolio, have a buy and hold strategy, but around the edges, you could look to make the minor adjustments or look to buy into opportunities that may present themselves, as they have recently, right? With the FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, when they went down a couple of years ago significantly, they were good, strong stocks. That was a good potential buying opportunity. And since 2 years ago, they've done tremendously well. There may present these types of opportunities, but you may not always get in at the right time or get out at the right time or know what to do. So at the core of the portfolio, it's got to be buy and hold. Don't let timing or trying to time the market drive your decision-making process, but you can make some adjustments along the way. So here's the next teaching moment for you. So I talk about this a lot when I talk about financial wellness. I speak on that topic an awful lot. And I talk to folks the topic is under 50, reducing stress, and how to think about coming up with little pieces of money to invest on a consistent basis for the long run. And let me share with you what I tell them. So think about this for a moment. Let's say you're 35 years old. Okay, that's where we start. And we assume that we're buying a couple of cups of Grand Cafe mochas from Starbucks each week. All right? We don't really think about spending that kind of money. It's something we enjoy, right? Or if we have the family together and we have a pizza once a week with a couple of toppings. We don't really think about that type of investing, if you will. But if you recalibrate the way you think about it for a moment and just think about earmarking the amount of money you would spend on 2 cups of coffee at Starbucks a week or a pizza with 2 toppings a week, what would be the impact down the road? And we did a study on this. We crunched some numbers, and at a 7% rate of return, and again, certainly no guarantees for any future performance, okay? But just for illustrative purposes, at a 7% rate of return, those 2 cups of coffee from Starbucks could add over $111,000 when you retire at the age of 65, 66. That pizza with 2 toppings, a little bit more money, could add, if you started to do that every single week during starting at 35 till you're 65 or 66, could add approximately $220,000. So again, think small and consistently invest over the long run, and you'll put yourself in a position where you have a higher probability of being able to get the outcome you desire. So now that we've talked about strategically from 30,000 feet, how to think about investing, it has to be long-term, really at least 5 years or beyond, that in short periods of time, markets can be very uncertain, how to think about compounding, how not to time markets, how to put together a core portfolio and maybe take some opportunities around the hub. Now I want to share with you about some of the specific ways to invest and the difference, and here's the teachable moment, the difference between active investing and trying to pick individual stocks or funds versus what we call passive investing or investing in indexes. So the difference between active and passive investing is an active manager is looking to outperform the market by making strategic moves, buys and sells with the individual stocks or bonds, okay, that they think that they can add value by making those changes on an ongoing basis. Some managers do it constantly, some do it occasionally, but those are active managers, typically in the world of the mutual fund industry, okay? When it comes to passive or indexing and investing in indexes, the indexes invest in the index itself, the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, okay? They invest in a basket of funds that basically stays where it is, passive, no movement on it, and the performance of that particular basket is based on how the entirety does. and the manager is not buying and selling. It's a passive approach. By the way, typically, usually, not all the time, but more often than not, the active approach typically costs a little bit more to be in a mutual fund or exchange traded type of fund that is actively investing versus a passive manager or the traditional index funds that have a lower cost. If you have a higher cost, it gives you just a little bit more bogey to overcome in terms of the performance as well. So this is a study that was published by Morningstar, where it indicated that only 23% of active managers outperformed their passive peers over the last 10 years, with the study ending in 2019. So think a bit about this for a moment. We may want to think that we can, by trying to find opportunities and time markets, outperform the broad market in general, the passive investor. But the studies show over and over again that it's a very rare breed that can do that. So which is better for you? How do you build a portfolio? As I suggested previously, and here's a teaching moment for you, I think that you put together a core portfolio of passive indexed investing, whether it be here in the US or abroad and international. I'm not going to give you specific sectors per se, but I think that if you invest in those sectors, those broad markets, and use that as a core, and then find opportunities along the way that you think have a long-term impact on markets, again, whether it's cryptocurrency or renewable energy or social responsible investing or robotics, whatever it is you think that you could add potentially to the overall performance of the market, then maybe you invest in more active managers along the way, but they're just fewer managers. Again, where the core becomes the passive index manager that can sustain its success based on history. Again, no guarantees for any future performance, but based on the history that we do have, that it should bode very well for us in the future if we do focus on that indexed and passive investing. The final teaching point is what I call the need to rebalance. And I think this is a very, very important piece that is missed by most investors. If you remember, maybe you do, maybe you were around then back in the early 90s, the tech bubble was happening. By the end of the 90s, people's portfolio had moved to such a degree that 60, 70, 80% of their portfolio was now in mutual funds or individual stocks that were tech-based. And then in 2000, 2001, and 2002, the market tumbled, the tech bubble burst. And for 3 successive years, the markets were down. It's really important to understand that when things are going well, sometimes you're better off to do a little bit of rebalancing. And when it comes to strategic investing, let's say, for example, we want to be 60-40 invested, 60% in equities and 40% in fixed income, just as a benchmark. And let's say over the past few years, because the markets have done really well, that portfolio for you has gone from 60-40 to 75-25. It may be time to rebalance that, because when it does bust, you're going to get really hurt. So every once in a while, take a look at where that balance is and bring it back to near your overall goals so that you don't get hurt when markets get crushed. The old saying is, you're much better off to not lose a lot of money than necessarily gain a lot of money. In other words, if you can avoid the big downsides, you don't really have to participate in the big upsides in order to make your investment goals for whatever it is for you. For more of an insight into investing, and particularly in 401ks, take a look at our next video.